Welcome, I'm Gian. Today I'm going to show you how I made this amazing Thanksgiving spread from beginning to end. This is a little bit different than my typical videos, but I decided it would be fun to just kind of show you guys how I create a spread like this from beginning to end, and just to invite you to get a little peek into my family's Thanksgiving meal. So let's get started. The first thing that I did was to season the turkey, and I had a sponsored post comment, so I made a jerk turkey and I seasoned it with jerk seasoning, salt, a little bit of black pepper. I also added dark soy sauce, honey, and a little bit of oil, and then I just mixed it all together. And this video is a little bit different in the sense that you'll see me adding things as I go along. Like for example, now I'm adding orange zest, and I'm also going to add some poultry seasoning because you're literally seeing me cook in the kitchen as I would ordinarily without a recipe in mind. And some of the recipes that I'm going to share with you today, I already have on my blog, or there's a video on this channel. And some of those do not have recipes, but whichever ones do, I will have it linked below in the description box. To season the turkey, I am just running my fingers between the skin and the breast meat, and it creates a pocket, and this is where you want to put your seasoning. And I'm just going to put it, I'm going to do this generously because we want this turkey to taste good. And this is a relatively small turkey. It's only about 10 pounds, and this is more than enough meat for my small family. And I'm just kind of massaging that seasoning under the skin just to be sure that it spreads all in between. And don't forget to season the inside cavity as well. Then I'm going to take the remaining seasoning and I am going to rub it all around the turkey. And just be sure to season your turkey well. We decided to do turkey this year for Thanksgiving, but some years we do not. Let me know below in the comment section if you still make a turkey for Thanksgiving or you just use another meat as the main. But this recipe was really good. It was extremely tasty. I allowed the turkey to marinate in the fridge for 24 hours before baking it. And what I did differently this year is that I roasted it in the bag. So you can buy the oven turkey bags at your supermarket, and it is so juicy and absolutely delicious. And here's what the turkey looks like when it's done. It is so juicy, so full of flavor. This is definitely one of the best turkeys I have ever made, and we all enjoyed it. The next thing I'm going to do is make homemade cranberry sauce, and this is a super easy recipe. To a pot, I've added fresh cranberries and orange marmalade. I'm adding a little bit of sugar and some orange zest. I started with a little bit of sugar just because the orange marmalade already has sugar, so I wanted to kind of taste as I go. I've added a little bit of water and I'm going to stir this all together. And this doesn't take long to cook at all. It takes about 20 minutes from beginning to end. Once it comes to a boil, all of those little cranberries are going to start to pop, and then it's going to cook down and the sauce is going to thicken. And now that it's thickened, I checked it to see if it needed more sugar, and it did. So I added more brown sugar, and this is gonna have a little bit of a tang. It's cranberry after all, but this is such a simple recipe and it is so good. Let me know in the comment section below which you prefer, homemade cranberry sauce or the one in the can. I personally love both. Now this is the day before Thanksgiving, so on my agenda today is just to do some prep work. And what I'm doing is finely chopping some onions, and I'm using my Pampered Chef slap chop, which I absolutely love. I've shared that before. I'm also going to mince some garlic. I'm going to cut up some herbs, and I'm also going to make a cake. The day before Thanksgiving is the perfect day to do prep work like this. You can even do it just a few days ahead. I also like to do my desserts the day before because it just doesn't make sense to take on that type of work on the day of Thanksgiving. When it comes to the holidays and just getting it all done, it really does take planning, and sometimes it happens over the course of a few days, but it is so worth it because in the end you have more time on Thanksgiving Day to spend with your friends and family. And I'm going to do the same with my garlic. I'm going to add it to the slap chop and I am going to finely mince it. This is the quickest, easiest way to mince a lot of garlic. I absolutely love this thing. And once I'm done with the onions and garlic, I'm just going to cover it and place it into the fridge. I need the onions and the garlic for several recipes tomorrow, so it definitely saves on time. The next thing I'm going to do is to chop my herbs. And I have a combination of rosemary. I also have sage, thyme, and parsley. And I'm going to remove all of the herbs from the stems because I do want to finely chop the herbs. The rosemary I am going to use for the lamb chops, which I'll be sharing later. And the thyme, parsley, and sage, this will go into my sausage and sage stuffing that I'll share as well. This year for Thanksgiving, I didn't plan on making a lot of dishes. I really wanted to keep it simple, but somehow I got into the kitchen and it just took on a life of its own. However, it is the holidays. This happens. Thanksgiving comes around once a year. So why not have the dishes that you want to eat and that you enjoy? And I finally diced the rosemary and the thyme. I kept the rosemary separate because I want that for a different recipe. And I'm just going to place them into these small bowls. These bowls are so handy for prep. And I'm going to cover them and then place it into the fridge. The next thing I'm going to get started on is the lamb chops. And I found this recipe in a cookbook that I've had for many years, and it's for a Moroccan style lamb. And typically this recipe calls for the leg, but I'm using lamb chops. So I've added softened butter to a bowl. I've also added some of that garlic that I minced earlier, along with paprika, cumin, cayenne pepper, and also the rosemary that I prepped previously. I am going to add salt and then I am going to mix this all together. And it is important to use softened butter because obviously if the butter is cold, then it's going to be difficult to mix in order to make this paste. I've already cleaned the lamb. My butcher did a really good job at trimming the lamb chops, so all I had to do was just clean it and season it. And I am just getting in there with my hand. Yes, it's a little bit messy, but this is just how cooking can be sometimes. And I'm just making sure to rub every single lamb chop just to make sure that every side has all of that delicious seasoning. Once I'm done, I'm going to rinse my hand and then I am going to cover the lamb because I'm going to place the lamb into the fridge for 24 hours because this is the day before Thanksgiving. So I just season that and then I'm going to stick it into the fridge, and then all I have to do on Thanksgiving Day is just remove it from the fridge and cook it. So I've already started on my collard greens. I have a smoked turkey wing simmering in chicken broth with garlic and onions, and that was simmering for the last hour. Once it's tender and start to fall off the bone a bit, I am going to add my collard greens, and I prepped this collard greens about 2 days ahead. And I've already shared this complete recipe on the channel before, so I will be sure to have that link below in the description box. While that cooks, I'm going to get started on a pumpkin roll. Now my husband requested this recipe, so here I am making a pumpkin roll. In my mixing bowl, I've got all-purpose flour, and to that I've added baking powder and baking soda. I'm also adding ground cinnamon, and I'm going to add clove as well. And I'm checking my phone because I got this recipe from a very popular website, and I'll have it linked below in the description box as well. I've also added salt to my mixture, and I am just whisking it together. And I'm going to set that aside and get started on my wet ingredients. And here's why I always recommend breaking your eggs into a separate bowl and not into your main bowl. But luckily no shell was in the bowl. Now I've added sugar, and I am just going to mix it all together using my hand mixer just until the mixture thickens. The next thing I'm going to do is add canned pumpkin to the mixture, and just be sure if you're making this recipe to look for canned pumpkin puree and not pumpkin pie filling. It's two different things. And I'm just going to place it into my measuring cup and then put it into the mixture of egg and sugar, and I'm going to use my hand mixer to mix this all together. This pumpkin roll is one of those recipes that's seriously impressive, but it is very, very easy to make. Now I've added the dry mixture into that little mixture with the eggs and the sugar and the pumpkin, and I am just gonna pretty much fold it into the mixture using my spatula. Once that's done, I am gonna pour it out onto a baking pan that's been lined with parchment paper. This step is crucial in this recipe. If you're gonna make this recipe, do not skip lining the pan with the parchment paper. And once I've done that, I will spread the mixture out using my spatula into one thin layer, because this is essentially like a jelly roll cake. So it's gonna be a thin cake that you're gonna roll up with a cream cheese filling. And I'm making sure to spread it all the way to the ends just to get a nice even layer. Now once that's done, I'm going to place it into my oven, and this bakes for about 13 to 15 minutes. While that bakes, I am going to prepare my dish towel. Now you need to use a clean dish towel, and I am just sprinkling the dish towel with confectioner's sugar. You're going to see why we're going to need this in a little bit, but this is all a part of this recipe. Once the cake is out of the oven, I am just going to loosen it just to make sure that it's not stuck onto the pan. And I'm going to immediately turn it onto that dish towel that has powdered sugar. This is going to prevent the cake from sticking to the dish towel. And as you can see, that pretty much created like a cloud of powdered sugar, but that's fine. So I'm going to remove the pan, and then I am going to slowly peel back the parchment paper. And you want to do this as slowly as possible because you do not want to break the cake. Remember, the cake is still hot, so it is going to break pretty easily. And this is why you want to use the parchment paper, because imagine having a cake this thin in that baking pan. It will absolutely break into a million pieces if you try to remove it from the pan. Now once I've removed that parchment paper, I'm just going to roll that cake up into that jelly roll. And you need to do this while the cake is hot because it is pliable. And I'm just going to place the cake onto a cooling rack and allow it to cool completely like this. Whilst the cake cools, I'm going to get started on the filling. Now the cake doesn't take super long to cool just because it's such a thin cake. So while that is cooling in the corner, I am going to add a block of cream cheese that's at room temperature butter, confectioner's or powdered sugar, and I am using vanilla bean paste. And this is pretty much everything that you're going to need for this recipe. This is why I said earlier that this recipe appears more impressive than it actually is. It's actually pretty simple. And I'm just measuring out my confectioner's sugar. Whenever you measure dry ingredients, just be sure to run a knife across the top so that you can get an accurate measurement. And using my trusty hand mixer, which has made quite an appearance today, I am just gonna mix the cream cheese and butter and everything together until it's nice and smooth. And now the cake should have cooled completely. If not, just give it some more time. And I am just going to unroll it. And as you can see, rolling it up in that dish towel just gives it that shape. So once we roll it back up, it will be easy to roll into that Swiss roll shape. And I am just adding all of that cream cheese filling that we made, and I'm gonna spread it out in one even layer all across the surface of the cake. Go as close to the ends as you possibly can. One of the things I must say that I love about this cake, apart from the fact that it's a super easy recipe, it's not super sweet. Remember, the cream cheese does have the powdered sugar, but cream cheese itself tends to have a bit of a tang to it. So if you're someone who doesn't like super sweet desserts, then this is the perfect recipe for you. And I'm just slowly rolling the cake back up while kind of pulling the fabric away. Now the powdered sugar helps the cake from not sticking. And I just roll it all the way to the end, and then I am going to place this into a cling wrap and just wrap it tightly and then place it into the fridge. and dessert is done. I also purchased a spiced rum apple pie from a local bakery. My mother-in-law brought her carrot cake as well as grape nut ice cream, so we had quite a spread for Thanksgiving. Now all this while my collard greens was cooking away, so I have removed the skin and the bones of the smoked turkey, and I am just gonna let this cook down just until the liquid reduces. Now I had intended on serving a salad that day, so I made a quick salad dressing with pickled onions. To my little mason jar I've added vegetable oil. I'm also adding white wine vinegar, and I'm gonna add salt and black pepper. I'm also gonna add dried oregano, Dijon mustard, and then place the cover back on top and give it a good shake. This is why I love using mason jars to make salad dressings. It's just super easy. And once that's done, I am gonna slice some red onions, and I'm gonna add the red onions to the salad dressing. Now this is pretty much like a quick pickle for the onions because it's gonna soak up all of that flavor. So you can use the pickled onions on salad, sandwiches, and of course you still have the dressing that you can use as to dress your salad. And I'm just going to shake that all together and then just place it into the fridge. And we're pretty much at the halfway point. If you're still tuned in, thank you. Now we're going to get to the most requested recipe. I am making a sausage and sage stuffing, and I've just browned mild breakfast sausage. To that I've added diced celery and onion, and I'm also going to add some butter. And I'm just going to stir this all together, allow the butter to melt and the celery and the onions to just soften. I've also added some garlic, and I'm just going to mix this all together. You guys, my house smelled so amazing when I was making this recipe. And once this has sauteed for a few minutes, I am going to add the chopped herbs, which is a combination of sage, thyme, and parsley, and just stir it all together. And I say stuffing, even though I'm not going to stuff the bird with this, but let me know in the comment section below if you say stuffing or dressing. Now to the pot, I'm adding chicken broth. I'm also going to add a can of cream of chicken soup. And I'm just going to mix this all together. And I know this is not necessarily the healthiest dish, but you guys, the holiday just comes around not so often, and why not just eat what you like? It's okay. You don't have to eat like this every single day. I don't, but at holiday times, I just make the dishes that I enjoy. To that, I'm adding black pepper, and I'm also going to add a little bit of salt to taste, and just let this boil for about 3 to 5 minutes. I'm going to turn off the heat, and then I'm adding my bread croutons, and this is just a loaf of sourdough bread that I tore apart, and then I just toasted in the oven, and I just added it to the pot. And it looks a little bit liquid, but it's okay. Remember that bread is going to soak all of that up, plus we do not want dry stuffing. Once I've got it nice and coated, I'm going to place it into my baking dish that I've coated with oil. And this is pretty much Thanksgiving morning. You can see me over there in my pajamas. Like I said, I'm just showing you how I prepared my Thanksgiving meal, and I am just gonna cover this and place it on the side. About an hour before dinner, I uncovered it and placed it into the oven and baked it for about 35 to 40 minutes. Next, I'm going to get started on my cornbread, and I doctored it up just a little bit. I used the mix, but that's just fine. To the bowl, I've added milk, and I'm also adding an egg. I like to add sour cream as well to my cornbread, but I did not have any, so I skipped it this time. I'm adding about 2/3 of a can of cream corn to the cornbread. This makes it so good. Then I'm going to add the egg and milk mixture and just mix it all together. And I thought this was a little bit runny, so I added a little bit more of the cornbread mix. I did not show it, but I did add some more. As you can see, the texture is different. So I greased my pan, and then I had some helpers in the kitchen who wanted to help me stir the cornbread, so I allowed them to because, well, they're only little ones. And a big part of holidays is not just about the food or the presents, it's also about that time that you get to spend with your family and the memories that you create in doing so. And some of my fondest memories are with my mom, just preparing, just in the kitchen together. So why not create that with my sons? Next, I'm going to get started on the glaze for the ham. To a pot, I've added brown sugar, I've also added honey, and I'm adding ginger preserve. I found this at my local supermarket. If you cannot find it, just add grated ginger. I'm also adding Dijon mustard and red pepper flakes, and I'm just going to stir this all together. Then I'll allow it to cook on like a medium fire just until the sugar melts and everything just mixes together. And this glaze is so good. Just a few ingredients and the ham will be absolutely delicious. Now once the glaze is done, I am just gonna trim the ham of any excess fat. Now this ham has a bone in it. I plan on cooking it in my slow cooker. And using my knife, I am gonna cut into the ham probably about 1/2 inch deep. And I'm just gonna cut into the ham to form that diamond pattern. And I wasn't planning on making a ham for Thanksgiving, but my husband was like, we absolutely need ham. And I love ham. I just thought it was a lot of food, but you know, we'll eat the ham and whatever we have left over we'll use for sandwiches or even in the morning just with eggs, so it will not go to waste. The next thing I'm doing is to take whole cloves and just stick it into the ham. It just makes it pretty, plus it gives the food a little bit of that holiday taste and aroma. Now once that's done, I am going to place it into my slow cooker, and I'm going to slow cook this on low for about 2 to 2.5 hours. To the bottom I've added Coke, and this is the mini can, so this is about 8 ounces of Coke, and I just placed the ham in there and I just poured about half of the can over the ham. Then I'm going to use a little bit of that glaze and just pour it over the top. Now you don't want to use all of the glaze because we will place this into the oven later on. And I'm just making sure that all of the top of the ham is covered in that glaze. Then I'm going to place the cover on and allow this to cook on the side. And I've taken the cornbread out of the oven and I'm just rubbing the top with about a tablespoon of butter and allowing that to melt. Then I am going to drizzle some honey over the top of the cornbread and just use the knife to just spread it all the way across the top. The next dish I'm going to get started on is rice and cheese loaf, or just say a cheesy rice. It is similar to mac and cheese except that you're using rice. To my pot I have butter which I am melting, and to that I am adding the finely diced onion and garlic that I prepared the day before, and I am just going to saute together just until the onion softens, and then I am going to sprinkle flour. We're pretty much creating a roux. Like I said, we're pretty much making this the same way in which you would make mac and cheese. And I'm just going to stir this all together just to make sure all that flour and butter comes together, and let it cook for a few minutes just to get all that raw flour taste. And then I'm going to add the milk, and using my whisk I'm just going to stir it all together. I like to do this just to make sure there are no big clumps of flour in the mixture. Then I'm going to add the remainder of the milk, and I'm going to let this cook on about a medium low heat, just allowing the sauce to cook, and as it cooks it thickens. And I have some rice that I cooked the day before in preparation for this recipe. Day-old rice just works best, and it's so easy to separate the grains of the rice using the fork. Now once my sauce has thickened, it's time to season it, and I am using pepper sauce. I'm also adding some salt, and I am just going to mix this all together. I'm also going to add a bit of Dijon mustard to it, and then I'm going to add my cheese. And you guys, I just did not have time to shred cheese, so I am using pre-shredded cheese. And at this point I've turned off the heat, and I'm just going to allow the cheese to melt in the heat of the sauce, and this just takes just a minute or two, and just keep stirring. And look at that sauce, you guys. Couldn't you just simply bathe in that? Because I certainly can. You know this is going to be good. Now, once that cheese is nice and melted, it's time to add the rice. And once I've added all the rice, I'm going to mix it all together. And as I was mixing it, I felt as though it was just a little dry. So I thought it needed some additional milk. And you can see that I added probably about a quarter to a third of a cup of milk. And it just helped to loosen the sauce so that I could mix the rice and the cheese sauce together. And the next thing I'm going to do is add a beaten egg. And once you add the egg, you want to stir this pretty quickly because you don't want the egg to scramble and to have lumps of egg in the mixture. Just be sure to mix it all together. And I'm also going to add some dried parsley and just mix this. And I made this a few hours before dinner, then I just set it on the side, and about an hour before dinner is when I popped it into the oven. So I've removed the pumpkin roll from the cling wrap and I've placed it onto the tray that I'm going to serve it on, and just using a serrated knife, I am just cutting all the way through. And in order to get a clean cut, I like to wipe the knife with a towel in between cuts, and as you can see, there goes that beautiful little swirl. Like I said, this dessert is so impressive, but it is super easy to make. And for serving purposes, just to make it pretty, I just like to lay a few out like that. That other piece I gave to my husband, and I'm just going to use some powdered sugar and just give it a light sprinkling over the top, and it looks so pretty. Now at this point, it's coming down to the wire. I am sticking the stuffing into the oven. I am sprinkling a bit of cayenne pepper on top of the rice and cheese loaf, and I've stuck that into the oven. The mashed potatoes are going, and this is the cranberry sauce that I made a few days before. I placed it into its serving dish, and I'm just gonna garnish it with a little bit of orange zest just to make it look pretty, because you know this is the holidays and we do kind of want to go the extra step. Now the cornbread is looking so good, and it is so moist, you guys. That cream of corn really does make a difference, and I am just using my knife to cut it into bite-sized pieces for serving. And I just pretty much served it right into this baking pan. I like to keep a lot of white dishes because even though you buy them at different times, it still looks uniform on the table. And here's the mashed potatoes. I've showed you guys already how to make the mashed potatoes, so I'm not going to do that process all over again from beginning to end, but I got that done as well. Now once the ham is cooked for about 2 hours in a slow cooker, I removed it and placed it into another baking dish, and this is the glaze that we made earlier. It's cold and it's thickened, and also those slits have opened up. So I'm just going to place the glaze on top, and some of that glaze is going to drip in between those slits, and this ham is going to be so good. I'm just going to place it into the oven at 450 degrees and let it bake for about 10 to 15 minutes, just until that glaze gets nice and thick and sticky and golden. And as I said, you guys, this is pretty much down to the wire. So I'm trying to make the gravy for the mashed potatoes. To a pan, I have melted butter and flour, and I'm just mixing it together. I'm gonna allow this to brown a little bit, and then I am gonna use some turkey stock that I made earlier in the day, and I'm gonna add that to the mixture and just stir it all together and allow this to cook and thicken. Now you need to taste it to see if it needs any more salt or any more black pepper or maybe a little bit of herbs, but this was just fine as it was. I just make sure it was nice and smooth and just allow it to cook until it thickened. And the last dish of the night was the lamb. To a pan, I've added olive oil and butter, and I'm just gonna add that lamb, those lamb chops that we seasoned the day before, and just place it into the pan. And this cooks so quickly. It pretty much just cooks for about 3 minutes per side. And you guys, the lamb was so good and so juicy. And here is the spread. We have the lamb, we have the homemade cranberry sauce with the garnish, we have the rice and cheese loaf. It was so delicious. We have our gravy, mashed potatoes, we have the jerk turkey that we made. This is half because we ate the other half a day or two before. We also have that sausage and sage stuffing, the collard greens with smoked turkey, and that delicious ham. We also have that super easy honey cornbread that we made, and let's not forget dessert. We have the pumpkin roll, and this is the spiced rum apple pie that I purchased. Thank you guys for joining me once again. This was definitely a meal of love, and I had a ton of fun doing it. I like cooking like this. I can't wait to do it again for Christmas. Thank you guys for joining me. If you've enjoyed this video, please be sure to subscribe to my channel. Please give me a thumbs up, leave a comment in the comment section below, and I will see you guys in the next one.